dear friends. I know I'm of that age when people begin to transition. After all, we aren't in our 40s anymore. That, however, does not make that process of transition or losing friends any easier. Bob was a college friend and he was married to his college sweetheart. We were in each other's weddings and shared occasional vacations together. We loved to discuss religion. Why? Because he was an atheist. We had been friends for over 55 years when he made his transition, and his family asked me to do his service because they knew that all the discussions we had had. Helen was a former member of the center in Chico that I attend. And when she moved away back to New York several years ago, we maintained a friendship through email and occasional telephone calls. I can still hear her laugh, like it came from the very core of her being and out. And Danny was a student when he walked into the recreation program class I was teaching at Cal State Long Beach. And we had skied and camped together, and ultimately Danny worked for me. We never got the chance, however, to go fishing, something that we both love to do. Something always seemed to get in the way, and our planned trip with close friends weeks after this past. We had known each other for 40 years. I became close to John when he married a dear friend of mine, and we spent many an evening over a bottle of wine and a delicious meal, philosophizing and discussing the state of politics in America and the meaning of Native American spirituality, totems, and symbols. It was something that we were both interested in. His death came unexpectedly and quickly. Only moments were left for my girlfriend, his wife, his children and grandchildren to say goodbye. All of these friends left a big hole in my world, as well as those who loved them. All of them had made an incredible difference in the world in their own way and in their own professions. Were they famous or well known? Were they published? No. But to me, they were special, and I truly miss each and every one of them. You're probably wondering why I'm talking about death today. The reality of what happened in Uvalde, Texas a couple of years ago, or with 4th of July coming, Highland Park in Illinois, or in New York with Buffalo, New York, or even Gaza in recent years, reminds us how none of us really know when our clock will stop ticking, or when others will no longer be with us. We never lose our oneness with God or others, however, even when we cannot see them, even when they have transitioned from the planet Earth. After all, death cannot contain God, so how can it contain our loved ones? We need only remember the story of Easter to be reminded that the individuals that we love go on living within each and every one of us. Any of us who have lost a loved one knows when they are near. I'm reminded of the scene from Ghost. How many of you have seen Ghost? Great movie. Remember when Demi Moore's on one side of the door and Patrick Swayze's on the other, and the penny starts to climb up the door? She knows instinctively that it's her deceased husband, letting her know that he is there, gently moving that penny from the underneath the door and on up. My brother Ken passed in Christmas of '91, and our entire family was challenged by his passing. Years later, feathers started to show up in my life in the strangest places. And perplexed, I questioned the constant appearance of feathers one day when I was at our church conference at Asilomar. And a fellow practitioner said, "Why, Eileen, it's your brother. He's sending you love." I was amazed from that point forward when feathers would show up in my life. Most of the time, it was when I needed reassurance or in moments of challenge or sorrow. As I was walking across the campus just before, at Asilomar, just before I was to take my interviews to be able to become a minister, somebody stopped me to tell me, "You've got this, Eileen." And I looked down and there was a feather between my feet. He always knows when to come. Just like God is always there when we least expect her, she has never left us. We need only a gentle nudge or a gentle reminder. I'm here. I'm one with you in this sacred space and place. It is our choice whether we fall into the divine embrace or completely ignore it. I believe that love is very much a part of oneness. Ralph Waldo Trine states, when we fully realize the great fact of the oneness of all life, that all are partakers from this one infinite source, and so the same life is the life in each individual, then prejudices go and hatred ceases. Love grows and reigns supreme. Oneness is an intimacy like no other that we have ever experienced. Ernest Holmes in the Science of Mind text says, this is the perception that Buddha and Jesus and other great spiritual leaders had. They understood that the universe has to be one in order to be at all. Jesus said, "Who hath seen me hath seen the Father." Jesus had arrived at a perception of oneness. What we must understand is that oneness does not stop when someone passes on. In fact, it is strengthened because we embrace our oneness in a new way. They are no longer here physically, but they are ever so deep within each of us. Their presence is held within. Often when I speak of oneness, I am reminded of the story of the Cherokee boy who desires to become a man. And when it's time for him to become that man, there's a very special ritual that he and his father partake in. So his father takes him out to the forest and he blindfolds him and he steps him up to sit on a stump. And he gives him the following directions. You may not speak, you may not cry out. You must sit here until the sun comes up tomorrow morning and be at peace. And only then can you take your blindfold off. And so the boy naturally is terrified as he hears the crunching of the pine and his father walking away. And he hears all kinds of noises all night long. There's wild beasts, he thinks, everywhere. And maybe a human being might come along and even harm him. And the wind blows and the grass around his legs, and he feels as though someone is coming to get him on the stump. But he must sit there stoically and not remove the blindfold. It is the only way he can become a man. And finally, after a horrific night of sitting there all by himself, he takes the blindfold off and discovered his father sitting there with him. He was never, ever alone. We are never alone. God is always within us, sitting on that stump right next to us. And of course, the moral of the story is just because you can't see God doesn't mean that He is not. So just what is oneness? Simply put, it means there is no separation from God, each other, and all things within the universe. Recently, I went camping with a group of, and someone asked me what I was working on, and I indicated this lesson. The next question came quickly. So, Eileen, what's oneness? And my own personal belief, I stated that oneness, not just our intimacy with God and others, it includes forgiveness. There would be no oneness without loving kindness and compassion. Oneness is knowing and understanding another person's pain without judgment or trying to fix it. Living in oneness is letting go of duality. It is the gratitude for our intertwining with nature and with each other. About that time, someone said, "Look," and they pointed to the sky. And as we continued to talk about oneness, there were 3 ospreys above us that were circling, all at different levels, and yet at the same time with each other. It was as if they were a team. We knew they were in search of food, and as we stood there and stared into the trees and into the sky with wonder, I told the others, that is the perfect example of oneness. Not only were the ospreys one with each other, they were one with their surroundings as well as with us. In 1 Corinthians 6:17, we are told, "But he who unites himself with our Lord becomes one with him in spirit." This concept of oneness is certainly not new. The verse was written over 2,000 years ago. According to Sensei Alex Kokoyo, in an article about the teaching of Buddhist oneness, he says, oneness is a teaching that states all living beings is in the same pot. So we're all in this stew together. We share the same roots, and what benefits one of us naturally benefits all of us. Similarly, what hurts one of us hurts all of us. So we must practice right mindfulness, use our inner wisdom in our daily life. If we don't, the results will be disastrous. For example, if we cut down trees near our home, our air quality will suffer and it'll be harder to breathe. If we poison our rivers, then we'll struggle to find clean drinking water. And of course, we still have our individuality because a river is a river and a tree is a tree. And we're still human beings living seemingly separate lives. But if we look beneath the surface, we can truly see the oneness in all things. And then we understand that our well-being is tied to the rivers and to the trees and to the people around us. So we care for them just like we care for ourselves. It is a simple reminder that when we harm mothers or others or Mother Earth, we harm ourselves. When we fail to recycle, for example, we're harming all of environment. When we don't pick up a piece of trash, we're not honoring Mother Earth. And when we use the drive-through at the fast food outlet, we're contributing to the terrible air quality that exists right here in Butte County with our car emissions as it explodes as we sit there for 20 minutes for our damn taco. There are so many connections in our oneness with God and with each other and our surroundings. There is an intimacy with the divine when we come to realize and embrace our oneness. We've all heard the definition of intimacy, into me I see. Oneness is seeing into ourselves and not being afraid to see what we see. After all, God sees all of our foibles. In our oneness with God, we come to a place of acceptance of ourselves through knowing that He isn't done with us yet. We are perfect in this moment just the way we are, and oneness is about having the courage to accept ourselves and others just as God has. Spirit never left us, but we have left ourselves when we look within and are afraid of what we see. Oneness is working with the inner outward, not outward inward. What happens outside of us may just be the nudge that forces us to move to a deeper place of oneness, to grow, to forgive, and to heal. In knowing ourselves at a greater and a deeper level, we come to a place of knowing God at a greater depth than ever before. Why do you suppose finding our oneness with God and others, however, is so difficult? Simply put, it is us and our thought process that prevents it. In an article by Matteo Sol, he tells us, while our mind helps us plan, imagine, create, structure, and ideologically understand life, they also simultaneously fragment our existence. When life is broken down into thoughts and concepts and ideas and beliefs, we cannot directly experience the oneness of everything. Instead, we perceive life through a broken lens. Until we can take all of those cracked glasses, we will continue to see ourselves as isolated and separate little entities who see the world only in black and white. It's like rock tumbler effect. Have you ever seen a rock tumbler? It's a little machine with a cylinder on it, and you put your rocks in it, and you put sand and water in it, and it tumbles it for about a week over and over and over again, and then you pull the stuff out, and you wash them off, and you put the rocks back in, and some new sand and some new water. And this could go on for 5 or 6 weeks just to bring out some beauty within that rock. But it's that constant tumbling and that happens within. It's ultimately what makes that stone be reborn as a highly polished piece of beauty. What begins as a rough, dull stone turns into something of wonder. That's what our spiritual growth process is like. There are abrasive things that transpire in our lives, like the loss of a loved one. We're forced into a tumbler we are not ready for. We resist in our pain and our anger and our frustration and our feeling abandoned by God. And yet God is always there, sitting on the stump with us, guiding us when we surrender, just like the rocks in the tumbler. Oneness is not trying to get God to conform to a way of thinking and being. It is about us taking the responsibility to explore the very depth of ourselves. And in doing so, we come to know our relationship in oneness is never ending and always growing. There are many forms of inner work, and all processes, however, focus on self-exploration, acceptance, and integration of our inner parts. While our path of choice may be slow, it can also be the deepest work that we will ever do. There are no quick fixes. To have more than a fleeting glimpse of our oneness, we must make our unconscious conscious again. As a luminary Carl Jung once said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. I want to leave you with a couple of readings today from sacred sources. The first is from the Gospel Thomas. This was the book that was left out of the New Testament and they put John in instead. But the book of Thomas is absolutely brilliant. And he states, when you make the two one, and when you make the inner as the outer, and the above as below, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, then you shall enter the kingdom. The second thought is from the Tao. How can the divine oneness be seen? In beautiful forms, breathtaking wonders, awe-inspiring miracles. The Tao is not obliged to present itself in this way. If you are willing to live by it, you will see it everywhere, even in the most ordinary things. All of my friends and family who have gone before me continue to be one with me just as God is. They are not far from my thoughts or far from my heart. And indeed, I recognize them in the sacredness of the ordinary that surrounds me every day. This is the truth in my life, and this is the truth in yours. And so it is. Amen.